Step into History Page, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot brings timeless mysteries to life.
In the shadowed halls of Marsdon Manor, a screen pierces the night, and a loyal housekeeper lies dead, poisoned. Was it the ghostly figure in white, haunting the West Wing, or a darker human hand? Why did a hidden codicil, buried for a decade, spark murder? Hercule Poirot, with his brilliant mind, unravels a web of lies, secrets, and betrayal. Who among the Manor's elite hides a deadly truth? Step into Agatha Christie's world of suspense, where every clue counts, and the shocking reveal will leave you breathless. Chapter 1. The Shadow of Marsdon Manor. The late autumn sun cast a feeble glow over the rolling hills of Hertfordshire, painting the landscape in hues of amber and gold. Marsdon Manor, a grand yet somber edifice of weathered stone, stood sentinel at the edge of the village of Little Marsdon, its gabled roofs and ivy-clad walls exuding an air of faded opulence. The estate, inherited by the young and enigmatic Sir Reginald Marsdon, was the pride of the county, yet whispers of misfortune clung to its name like cobwebs to its ancient halls. It was here, on the evening of October 12th, that Captain Arthur Hastings, friend and occasional confidant of the renowned Belgian detective Hercule Poirot, found himself drawn by an invitation, as curious as it was unexpected. Hastings, ever the man of action rather than contemplation, had received a letter from Sir Reginald himself, penned in an elegant yet urgent hand. The baronet, it seemed, was troubled by matters he could not fully disclose in writing, though he hinted at a shadow over the house that required the keen insight of a mind such as Poirot's. Hastings, ever eager to involve his friend in a puzzle, had promptly wired Poirot in London, and the detective, with his characteristic blend of curiosity and reluctance, had agreed to accompany him to the manor. As their motor car wound through the narrow lanes toward Little Marsdon, Hastings glanced at the diminutive figure beside him, bundled in an immaculate overcoat despite the mild weather. "Poirot, old chap," Hastings ventured, gripping the steering wheel. "You've been awfully quiet. What do you make of this business?" Sir Reginald's letter was dashed mysterious, don't you think? Hercule Poirot, his eyes half closed as if in meditation, adjusted the brim of his hat with a precise flick of his gloved hand. Mysterious, mon ami, perhaps. But it is the nature of mystery to conceal itself behind the mundane. This Sir Reginald, he is young, wealthy, recently married, and yet he writes of a shadow. That, Hastings, is not the language of a man at ease. There is something at Marsdon Manor that disturbs the order of his little world, and it is the business of Hercule Poirot to restore that order. Hastings chuckled. "Underestimate, as always, the complexity of the human heart. A squabble, you say? No, no. A man does not summon Hercule Poirot for trivialities. There is a pattern here, waiting to be uncovered, and I shall find it." The car pulled into the gravel drive of Marsdon Manor just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn. The manor's facade loomed before them, its tall windows reflecting the dying light, like the eyes of a watchful giant. A butler, stiff and formal, greeted them at the door and led them through a cavernous hall, adorned with portraits of stern-faced Marsdon's past. The air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and old roses, and Hastings felt a prickle of unease as they were shown into the drawing-room. Sir Reginald Marsdon stood by the fireplace, a tall, handsome man in his early 30s, with a nervous energy that belied his aristocratic bearing. His wife, Lady Eleanor, sat nearby, her delicate features framed by auburn curls, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The room was populated by a small but varied cast. Dr. James Thornton, the family physician, a ruddy-faced man with a hearty laugh. Miss Clara Winthrop, Lady Eleanor's cousin,
a sharp-eyed young woman with a penchant for sketching, and Mr. Harold Vance, Sir Reginald's solicitor, a thin, bespectacled man whose fingers twitched as if perpetually counting figures. Rounding out the group was Mrs. Agnes Poole, the housekeeper, whose stern demeanor suggested she ruled the household with an iron hand. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, thank you for coming," Sir Reginald said, his voice betraying a slight tremor. "I fear we are in need of your expertise. There have been incidents here, things I cannot explain." Poirot inclined his head, his eyes scanning the room with the precision of a jeweler examining a gem. "Incidents, you say? Pray, enlighten me, Sir Reginald. What is this shadow that troubles you?" Sir Reginald hesitated, glancing at his wife, who gave a barely perceptible nod. "It began 3 weeks ago," he said. "Strange noises in the night, footsteps, whispers, even laughter. At first we thought it was the wind, or the servants, but it has grown worse. Objects move without explanation. A vase in the library was found shattered, though no one was near it. And then, last night—" He paused, his face paling. "Last night, Eleanor saw something. The figure, she says, in the west wing. It vanished when she approached. Lady Eleanor's voice was soft, but steady. It was no trick of the light, Mr. Poirot. It was a woman, dressed in white, her face obscured. I followed her, but she was gone by the time I reached the corridor's end."
Probably a servant playing tricks. Or someone with a more sinister purpose, Dr. Thornton added, his tone jovial, but his eyes serious. "This house is old, full of secrets. Who knows what grudges linger?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "Let us not leap to conclusions, mes amis. A figure in white, you say? Most curious. And these noises, these objects, they occur at specific times?" "Mostly at night," Sir Reginald replied. "Between midnight and 2 o'clock, if the clocks are to be trusted." "Clocks," Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming. "Always they are the silent witnesses. Tell me, Sir Reginald, who else resides in this house? Servants, guests, anyone who might shed light on these events?" The baronet listed the household: himself, Lady Eleanor, Miss Winthrop, Dr. Thornton, who often stayed overnight, Mr. Vance, visiting for estate matters, Mrs. Poole, and a small staff of maids and footmen. Poirot listened intently, his fingers steepled, his mind already arranging the pieces of this peculiar puzzle. As the evening progressed, dinner was served in the grand dining room, where the tension among the guests was palpable. Hastings noted the way Miss Winthrop's eyes darted to Lady Eleanor, as if searching for a crack in her composure. Dr. Thornton spoke too loudly, his anecdotes forced, while Mr. Vance remained silent, his gaze fixed on his plate. Mrs. Poole, overseeing the meal, moved with the precision of a general, her disapproval of the guests' chatter evident in her tight-lipped expression. After dinner, Poirot requested a tour of the manor, particularly the west wing where Lady Eleanor had seen the figure. The corridors were dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone. At the end of the west wing, a locked door led to an unused tower, its key kept by Mrs. Poole. Poirot examined the lock, his fingers tracing its edges, then turned to Hastings with a faint smile. "Mon ami," he said softly, "this house, it has secrets. But secrets, they are like shadows. They cannot exist without light to cast them. We shall find that light." As they returned to their rooms, Hastings couldn't shake the feeling that the manor was watching them, its walls whispering of things unseen. He glanced at Poirot, who was humming a tune under his breath, his eyes bright with the thrill of the chase. Whatever shadow hung over Marsdon Manor, Hastings knew his friend would not rest until it was dispelled. 2. The Silent Scream. The morning following Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings' arrival at Marsdon Manor dawned cold and gray, the sky heavy with the promise of rain. The household awoke to a grim discovery that transformed the vague unease of the previous
Detective's eyes alight with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Mon ami," Poirot said, adjusting his tie with infuriating calm. "A scream at such an hour is seldom without cause. Come, we must investigate." They followed the sound to the servants' quarters, where a small crowd had gathered outside the housekeeper's room. Mrs. Agnes Poole, the stern matriarch of the household staff, lay crumpled on the floor, her face contorted in a rictus of agony. Her eyes, wide and unseeing, stared at the ceiling, and a faint froth lingered at the corner of her mouth. Dr. James Thornton knelt beside her, his fingers pressed to her wrist, though his expression confirmed what all suspected. Mrs. Poole was dead. "Good heavens," Hastings murmured, his stomach churning. "What happened to her?" Dr. Thornton rose, his ruddy face pale. "Poison, I'd wager. The symptoms, convulsions, frothing, are consistent with strychnine or something similar. She must have ingested it sometime in the night." Poirot's gaze swept the room, taking in every detail. The untouched teacup on the bedside table, the open window letting in a chill breeze, the faint scuff marks on the polished floor. "Poison, you say? Most interesting. And yet the teacup, it is full. If she drank poison, where is the vessel that delivered it?" Sir Reginald Marsdon, summoned by the commotion, stood in the doorway, his face ashen. "This is monstrous," he said, his voice trembling. "Mrs. Poole was the backbone of this house. Who would do such a thing?" Lady Eleanor, clinging to her husband's arm, looked faint. "It's the shadow," she whispered. "The figure I saw. It's connected. I know it." Miss Clara Winthrop, standing nearby with her sketchbook clutched to her chest, scoffed softly. "Nonsense, Eleanor. Ghosts don't poison people. This is the work of a human hand, and a cruel one." Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the rising murmurs. "Silence, s'il vous plaît. We must proceed with method. Dr. Thornton, when did you last see Mrs. Poole alive?" The doctor rubbed his chin, frowning. "Last night, around 10 o'clock when I retired. She was supervising the clearing of the dining room. Seemed perfectly well then." "And you, Sir Reginald?" Poirot's eyes fixed on the baronet. "I saw her at the same time," Sir Reginald replied. "She brought me some papers to sign in the library. She was her usual self, brisk, efficient." Poirot turned to the butler, a wiry man named Jenkins, who hovered nervously at the edge of the group. "And you, monsieur? Did you hear or see anything unusual in the night?" Jenkins hesitated, his eyes darting to Lady Eleanor.
Was found. The maids, gathered in a tearful huddle, shook their heads. Poirot knelt beside the teacup, examining it without touching it. "It is clean, untouched, yet Mrs. Poole is dead by poison. This is a puzzle, Hastings, and one that requires the little gray cells." The local police were summoned, and Inspector Grayson, a gruff man with a penchant for jumping to conclusions, arrived within the hour. He surveyed the scene with a practiced eye, then declared, "Looks like suicide to me." The old woman was strict, maybe too strict. Couldn't handle the pressure of running this place. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Suicide, Inspector?" No. Mrs. Poole was a woman of iron will. Such a one does not end her life with poison. Besides, where is the container? The poison did not materialize from thin air. Grayson bristled, but said nothing, clearly unused to being contradicted. Poirot, undeterred, requested permission to examine Mrs. Poole's belongings.
The room was sparse, befitting the housekeeper's austere nature. A narrow bed, a wardrobe, a desk with neatly arranged papers, and a small locked box. Poirot, with the inspector's grudging approval, opened the box using a key found in Mrs. Poole's pocket. Inside were letters, some yellowed with age, and a small vial containing a few grains of white powder. "Voilà," Poirot said, holding the vial to the light. "This, perhaps, is our poison. But why keep it in a locked box? And how did it reach her lips?" Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, frowned. "Could someone have slipped it into her food or drink last night?" Poirot shook his head. "The teacup, Hastings, it is untouched. And the dinner? It was shared by all. No one else is ill. No. The method of delivery is more subtle, more ingenious." The household was summoned to the drawing room, where Poirot began his inquiries. Each member of the Manor's circle was questioned, their alibis meticulously recorded. Sir Reginald claimed to have been in his study until midnight, reviewing estate accounts with Mr. Vance, who confirmed this. Lady Eleanor had retired early, reading in her room until 11. Miss Winthrop said she had been sketching in the conservatory until 10:30, then went to bed. Dr. Thornton, after seeing Mrs. Poole at 10, claimed to have played cards with himself in his room until midnight. The servants, save Jenkins, reported no unusual activity, though one maid, a timid girl named Lily, admitted to hearing a laugh, like a woman's, near the west wing, at around 1 o'clock. Poirot listened, his eyes flicking from face to face, noting every gesture, every hesitation. "You see, Hastings," he said later,
Steeped in a heavy silence, Hastings couldn't shake the image of Mrs. Poole's lifeless form, nor the sense that the shadow Lady Eleanor described was more than a figment of imagination. At Poirot's request, he accompanied the detective to the west wing, where they examined the locked tower door. The key, kept by Mrs. Poole, was now in Poirot's possession, and he opened the door to reveal a spiral staircase leading to a dusty, unused chamber. The air was stale, the windows boarded shut, but Poirot's sharp eyes caught a faint disturbance in the dust, a footprint, small and delicate, as if made by a woman's shoe. "Regardez, Hastings," Poirot said, pointing. "The shadow walks, and it leaves traces. This footprint, it is fresh, no more than a day old. Someone has been here, and recently." "But who?" Hastings asked, his mind racing. "And why? What does the tower have to do with Mrs. Poole's death?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Patience, mon ami. The little gray cells, they work. The tower, the poison, the figure in white, they are pieces of the same puzzle. We must find how they fit." As night fell, the manor seemed to close in around them, its shadows deepening. Hastings felt a growing dread, but Poirot, ever composed, retired to his room with a notebook, sketching a timeline of the previous night's events. "The truth," he murmured, "is in the details, and Hercule Poirot shall find it." Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The rain that had threatened all morning finally descended upon Marsdon Manor, cloaking the estate in a gray veil that seemed to mirror the mood of its inhabitants. The death of Mrs. Agnes Poole had cast a pall over the household, and the arrival of Hercule Poirot, though anticipated by Sir Reginald, brought with it a curious mixture of relief and apprehension. The Belgian detective, now officially engaged to unravel the mystery of the housekeeper's death, stood in the grand hall of the manor, his polished boots gleaming against the worn parquet floor. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, noted the way Poirot's sharp eyes darted about,
absorbing every detail of the surroundings with the precision of a watchmaker. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low as they awaited their host, "observe the atmosphere of this place. It is not merely the death of Madame Poole that weighs upon these walls. There is a tension, a discord, that speaks of secrets long buried." Hastings nodded, though he felt a touch out of his depth. "It's a grim business, Poirot. Poison, footsteps in the night, that footprint in the tower, it's all so unsettling." Poirot's mustache twitched with the faintest hint of a smile. "Unsettling, yes."
Leather-bound volumes, and dominated by a massive oak desk. The fire crackled in the grate, casting flickering shadows that danced across the faces of the gathered household. Lady Eleanor sat by the window, her auburn hair catching the dim light, her expression one of quiet dread. Miss Clara Winthrop perched on a velvet settee, her sketchbook open but untouched, her eyes flitting nervously. Dr. James Thornton stood near the fireplace, his hearty demeanor subdued, while Mr. Harold Vance, the solicitor, hovered near the desk, clutching a sheaf of papers as if they were a shield. Inspector Grayson, still bristling from Poirot's earlier dismissal of his suicide theory, stood apart, his notebook open but his attention fixed on the detective. "Monsieur Poirot," Sir Reginald began, his voice steady but strained, "I cannot express how grateful we are for your presence. Mrs. Poole's death, it's unthinkable. She was with our family for 20 years, a pillar of this house." Poirot inclined his head, his hands clasped behind his back. "My condolences, Sir Reginald. The loss of such a loyal servant is indeed a tragedy. But rest assured, Hercule Poirot does not take such matters lightly. I shall uncover the truth, however deeply it is hidden." Inspector Grayson cleared his throat, his tone gruff. "With all due respect, Mr. Poirot, I've got my men combing the grounds, and we've sent the vial from Mrs. Poole's box to the chemist in London. It's strychnine, no doubt about it. I still say she might have taken it herself. Servants get queer ideas sometimes." Poirot's eyes gleamed with polite disdain. "Queer ideas, Inspector? No. Madame Poole was a woman of discipline, of method. Suicide is not the act of such a one. No, we must look to those who had reason to wish her harm, and the means to deliver it." The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling over the group like a fog. Lady Eleanor shifted uncomfortably, her fingers twisting the lace of her handkerchief. Miss Winthrop's pencil tapped against her sketchbook, a nervous rhythm, while Dr. Thornton coughed and looked away. Mr. Vance's thin lips pressed tighter, and Hastings noted the solicitor's knuckles whitening around his papers. Poirot began his inquiries with his usual meticulous care, addressing each person in turn. "Lady Eleanor," he said, his tone gentle but probing, "you mentioned a figure in white, seen in the West Wing 2 nights ago. Can you recall any further details? The manner of her movement, perhaps, or the sound of her steps?" Lady Eleanor hesitated, her eyes meeting her husband's before she spoke. "She moved silently, almost as if floating. I heard no footsteps, only a faint rustle, like silk. Her face was hidden, but I felt she seemed to be watching me." Miss Winthrop snorted softly. "Eleanor, you've always had a flair for the dramatic. It was probably a curtain caught in the draught." Flicked to the cousin. "And you, Mademoiselle Winthrop, where were you at the time of this sighting? Say, between midnight and 2 o'clock 2 nights ago." Clara's eyes narrowed, but she answered promptly. "In my room, sleeping. I don't wander the halls at night like some Gothic heroine." Poirot nodded, unperturbed, and turned to Dr. Thornton. "Monsieur le Docteur, you are familiar with poisons, no? Strychnine, it is not a common substance. Where might one obtain it in a household such as this?" Thornton flushed, his jovial air faltering. "Well, I suppose it could be found in rat poison, or perhaps in an old medical kit. But I assure you, I keep no such thing in my bag. I'm a physician, not an apothecary." "And yet," Poirot mused,
The vial in Mrs. Poole's box suggests someone had access to such a substance. Curious, is it not? The questioning continued, with Poirot probing each alibi and observation. Mr. Vance claimed to have been in his room drafting legal documents until 1 o'clock, a fact Sir Reginald partially corroborated, though he admitted to retiring earlier. The servants, questioned separately, offered little beyond Lily's mention of the mysterious laugh in the West Wing. Jenkins, the butler, reiterated his story of hearing footsteps near the tower, though he could not specify the time beyond around midnight. After the interviews, Poirot requested to see the kitchen and pantry, where Mrs. Poole had last been seen preparing her nightly tea. The kitchen was spotless, its copper pots gleaming under the electric lights. Poirot examined the tea tin, the sugar bowl, and the kettle, his fingers lingering on a small jar of honey tucked behind a sack of flour. "This honey," he said to the cook, a stout woman named Mrs. Baxter, "it is used often?" Mrs. Baxter nodded. "Aye, sir. Mrs. Poole was fond of it in her tea, said it soothed her nerves." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And who has access to this pantry?" "Why, all the staff, sir, and the family, if they've a mind to come down here. It's not locked." "Most interesting," Poirot murmured, pocketing a small sample of the honey in a handkerchief. "We shall see what secrets this sweetness holds." As they left the kitchen, Hastings couldn't resist asking, "Do you think the poison was in the honey, Poirot?" "It's a clever way to administer it, I suppose." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, mon ami. But the honey, it is only one piece of the puzzle. The question is not only how the poison was given, but why. Mrs. Poole, she was not merely a housekeeper. She was a guardian of secrets, and someone wished to silence her." The day drew to a close with Poirot retreating to the library, where he spread out a sheet of paper and began sketching a timeline of the night of the murder. Hastings, he said, tapping the paper. "The alibis, they are like a tapestry with loose threads. Pull one, and the whole may unravel." That evening, as the household dined in strained silence, Poirot's presence seemed to loom larger than his small stature warranted. Hastings observed the glances exchanged between the guests, Sir Reginald's protective hand on his wife's, Miss Winthrop's sharp looks at Dr. Thornton, Mr. Vance's nervous fidgeting. The shadow over Marsdon Manor had grown darker with Mrs. Poole's death, and Hastings felt certain that Poirot was already piecing together the truth, one meticulous detail at a time. Chapter 4. The questions deepen. The rain continued its relentless assault on Marsdon Manor, drumming against the tall windows and casting a gloom that seemed to seep into the very walls. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the weather or the grim atmosphere, had spent the morning in quiet observation, his keen eyes noting every glance, every gesture among the household. Captain Hastings, trailing behind his friend, felt the weight of the previous day's discovery, Mrs. Poole's poisoning, pressing heavily on his mind. The manor, once merely unsettling, now felt like a stage where unseen actors played out a deadly drama. In the library, Poirot had commandeered a corner table, its surface covered with notes, a sketched floor plan of the manor, and a timeline of the night of the murder. His small, neat handwriting filled the pages, each line a testament to his methodical approach. Hastings, peering over his shoulder, marveled at the precision with which Poirot catalogued every detail, from the exact time of Lily's reported laugh to the position of the honey jar in the pantry. "Mon ami," Poirot said, not looking up from his notes, "you are restless. The little gray cells, they require calm to function. Sit, and let us review what we know." Hastings obeyed, though his mind buzzed with questions. "It's all so tangled, Poirot. The poison, the figure in white, the footprint in the tower. How does it all connect?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of satisfaction. "Connections, Hastings, are the essence of the puzzle. But first, we must gather more threads.
Today we deepen our inquiries. Each person in this house has a story, and within those stories lie contradictions. It is these contradictions that will lead us to the truth. Poirot began his interviews in the drawing room, where the household gathered under the watchful eye of Inspector Grayson, who hovered like a storm cloud. Skeptical, but curious, the detective's approach was deceptively gentle. His questions framed with a courtesy that belied their sharpness. He started with Lady Eleanor, whose delicate features were drawn with fatigue. "Madame," Poirot said, his tone soft but probing, "you spoke of the figure in white. You felt it was watching you. Can you reform to this shadow?" Lady Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her skirt. I don't know, Mr. Poirot. It was so fleeting. But there was a scent, perhaps. Something sweet, like lavender. I thought it was the air from the garden. But now I'm not sure." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Lavender, you say? Most interesting. And your movements that night, after you saw the figure, did you speak to anyone?" "No," she replied quickly, then hesitated. "That is, I went to Reginald's study to tell him, but he was already asleep at his desk. I didn't wake him." Sir Reginald, standing nearby, confirmed this with a nod. "I'd been working late on estate matters with Vance. I must have dozed off around 11:30. Poirot turned to Mr. Vance, the solicitor, whose thin frame seemed to shrink under the detective's gaze. "Monsieur Vance, you were with Sir Reginald until what time?" Vance adjusted his spectacles, his voice precise but nervous. "Until 11, Mr. Poirot. I left him to finish some documents and retire to my room. I heard nothing unusual." "And yet," Poirot mused, "Jenkins, the butler, heard footsteps near the west wing at midnight. If everyone was in their rooms, who was abroad in the house?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Poirot moved on to Miss Clara Winthrop, whose sharp tongue and quick eyes suggested a mind as observant as his own. "Mademoiselle, you are an artist, no? You see details others miss. Did you notice anything out of place in the days before Mrs. Poole's death? Perhaps a look, a gesture, an object misplaced?" Clara's lips pursed, as if weighing her words. "Mrs. Poole was stricter than usual lately, snapping at the maids over trifles. I saw her arguing with Lily in the hall 2 days ago. Something about a broken vase in the library. She seemed agitated." Poirot's interest sharpened. "A broken vase, you say? The same one Sir Reginald mentioned, perhaps. And this argument? What was its tone?" "Harsh," Clara said bluntly. "Mrs. Poole accused Lily of carelessness, but Lily swore she hadn't touched it. I didn't think much of it at the time. Just servant drama." Poirot made a note, his pencil moving with deliberate care. He then addressed Dr. Thornton, whose hearty demeanour had returned, though it seemed forced. "Doctor, you have experience with poisons. Strychnine. It is a swift and cruel death. How long, would you say, from ingestion to the end?" Thornton rubbed his chin, his eyes flickering to the floor. "Depends on the dose. But with strychnine, symptoms can appear within minutes. Convulsions, rigid—" "Meant to use it herself?" Poirot's smile was thin. "Or unless someone wished it to appear so. Tell me, Doctor, did you ever prescribe anything to Mrs. Poole? Perhaps a tonic, a sedative?" Thornton shook his head. "She was healthy as a horse. Never needed anything from me beyond a headache powder now and then." The interviews continued, with Poirot questioning the servants next. Lily, the timid maid, was visibly shaken, her eyes red from crying. "Mrs. Poole was cross with me, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I swear I didn't break that vase. And that laugh I heard
It wasn't human. It came from the west wing, near the tower, at 1 o'clock. Poirot's eyes narrowed. 1 o'clock, you say? And this laugh, it was distinct, none? Not the wind, not a creak of the house? Lily shook her head vigorously. No, sir. It was a woman's laugh, low and mocking. It made my skin crawl. After the interviews, Poirot and Hastings retired to the west wing, where the detective insisted on examining the corridor near the tower again. The locked door, now opened with Mrs. Poole's key, revealed the same dusty staircase. But Poirot's attention was drawn to a small alcove nearby, hidden behind a heavy curtain. There, in the dust, was a faint smear, as if something had been dragged across the floor. "Regardez, Hastings," Poirot said, pointing. "Another trace. This alcove, it is a place to hide, to watch. Someone stood here, perhaps observing Mrs. Poole's movements." Hastings frowned. But why? If they poisoned her, why linger in the west wing? Poirot's eyes gleamed. That, mon ami, is the question. The poison, the figure, the laugh, they are not separate events but parts of a single design. We must find the motive, and the motive lies in what Mrs. Poole knew, or what someone feared she knew. As they returned to the library, Poirot requested access to Mrs. Poole's papers, which Jenkins brought from her desk. Among the mundane records of household expenses were several letters, one of which caught Poirot's eye. A letter from a solicitor in London, dated a month prior, mentioning a confidential matter concerning the Marsdon estate. The letter was vague, but Poirot's fingers lingered on it, his mind clearly racing. "Dinner tonight," Poirot said suddenly. "It will be most illuminating. The household, they are nervous, Hastings, and nervous people, they make mistakes." That evening, the dining room was a study in tension. Sir Reginald spoke little, his eyes fixed on his wife. Lady Eleanor picked at her food, her face pale. Miss Winthrop's sharp comments cut through the silence, while Dr. Thornton's forced cheer
Rose, his voice commanding attention. "Mes amis, a crime has been committed in this house, and the truth is close. Tomorrow, I shall have more questions, but for now, I advise you all to sleep lightly. The shadow of Marsdon Manor is not yet dispelled." Hastings felt a shiver run through him, not from the cold, but from the certainty that Poirot was closing in on the killer, one meticulous step at a time. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The rain had ceased by the morning of the third day at Marsdon Manor, leaving the grounds sodden and the air heavy with the scent of damp earth. Inside, the atmosphere was no less oppressive, as the household grappled with the reality of Mrs. Agnes Poole's murder. Hercule Poirot, ever the calm centre of the storm, sat in the library, his notebook open before him, his pencil tapping rhythmically as he reviewed his timeline. Captain Hastings, pacing nearby, felt the weight of the case pressing on him. The myriad clues, footprints, laughter, a vial of poison, swirling in his mind like leaves in a gust. "Poirot," Hastings said, pausing by the window. "This business is getting murkier by the hour. Everyone's got an alibi, yet none of them feel solid. And that laugh Lily heard, it's downright eerie. Do you think it's connected to the figure Lady Eleanor saw?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with that familiar spark of intellectual excitement. "Eerie, mon ami. Perhaps. But the eerie is often the mundane in disguise. The laugh, the figure, the poison, they are threads in a tapestry,
and we must not be distracted by the bright colors of the red herring. Today, we shall test the alibis and see which unravel. The morning's inquiries began in the drawing room, where Inspector Grayson, growing increasingly impatient, had taken to questioning the servants with a heavy hand. His current target was Lily, the young maid, whose tearful demeanor had hardened into defiance under his scrutiny. "I told you, sir," she said, her voice trembling. "I heard that laugh at 1 o'clock, near the west wing. I wasn't imagining it." Grayson snorted. "A laugh, girl? You expect me to believe a ghost poisoned Mrs. Poole? More likely you're covering for someone, or you slipped her the poison yourself." Lily gasped, her face paling, and Hastings felt a surge of indignation. "Now see here, Inspector," he began. But Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Inspector Grayson," Poirot said smoothly, "your zeal is commendable, but to accuse without evidence is to chase shadows. Mademoiselle Lily, you are certain." Miss Clara Winthrop leaned against the mantel, her sketchbook tucked under her arm, her expression one of barely concealed impatience. Dr. James Thornton fidgeted with his watch, while Mr. Harold Vance, the solicitor, sat stiffly, his fingers drumming on his knee. "Let us consider the night of the murder," Poirot said, his voice commanding attention. "Each of you claims to have been in your rooms by midnight, yet we have footsteps at midnight, a laugh at 1, and a death sometime before 2. There is a gap, mes amis, and in that gap lies the truth. Let us examine the alibis more closely." He began with Sir Reginald, whose account of working late with Mr. Vance had been consistent, but vague. "Sir Reginald, you say you were in your study until 11:30, then fell asleep. Yet your wife found you there after seeing the figure in white, around midnight. Did you hear nothing? No footsteps? No laugh?" Sir Reginald frowned, his brow furrowing. "I was exhausted, Mr. Poirot. I heard nothing until Eleanor woke me. And even then, I thought it was a dream." Poirot's eyes flicked to Lady Eleanor. "And you, madame, after seeing the figure, you went to your husband. Did you pass anyone else in the corridors?" "No," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "The house was quiet. Too quiet, perhaps." Poirot nodded, then turned to Mr. Vance. "Monsieur Vance, you left Sir Reginald at 11. Your room is near the west wing, is it not? Did you hear the footsteps Jenkins reported?" Vance's spectacles glinted as he shook his head. "I was asleep by 11:15, Mr. Poirot. I keep early hours. I heard nothing." The detective's gaze lingered on the solicitor, noting the slight tremor in his hands. "Most interesting," Poirot murmured, then addressed Miss Winthrop. "Mademoiselle, you are observant. You saw Mrs. Poole argue with Lily about a broken vase. Did you notice anything else about Mrs. Poole in the days before her death? Perhaps a letter, a visitor, something out of character?" Clara's eyes narrowed, but she answered readily. "She was tense, more than usual. I saw her in the library one evening, reading a letter. She tucked it away when I entered, but she looked worried." Poirot made a note, his pencil moving with precision. "A letter, you say? This is most significant. And you, Dr. Thornton, did you ever see Mrs. Poole with such a letter?" Thornton's jovial mask slipped for a moment. "Not that I recall, Mr. Poirot. She was private, kept to herself," and Poirot's expression hardened. "Inspector, you see only the surface. The maid, she is young, frightened, and without motive. The poison, it was not administered by chance. It required planning, precision. We must look deeper. To test the alibis, Poirot proposed a reconstruction of the night's events. He asked each person to retrace their movements, timing their paths through the manor. Hastings accompanied Sir Reginald and Mr. Vance to the study, where the baronet demonstrated his work at the desk, while Vance pointed out the documents they had reviewed. The timing aligned, barely, but Hastings noted that Vance's room was indeed close to the west wing, a fact Poirot filed away. Lady Eleanor led them to the spot where she had seen the figure in white, near the west wing's alcove. Poirot examined the area again, his fingers brushing the curtain where the smear had been found. "This alcove," he said, "it is a place of concealment. Someone stood here, perhaps watching, perhaps waiting." Miss Winthrop, impatient, insisted on demonstrating her path from the conservatory to her room, her steps brisk and her alibi unshaken. Dr. Thornton, however, seemed flustered when asked to recreate his card game, fumbling with the deck as if unsure of his own story. Poirot watched, his eyes missing nothing. After the reconstruction, Poirot and Hastings returned to the library, where the detective examined the broken vase from the library, its shards carefully collected by the police. "This vase," Poirot said, holding a fragment to the light, "it was not broken by accident. The edges, they are too clean, as if struck deliberately. And yet Lily denies touching it. Why would Mrs. Poole accuse her?" Hastings frowned. "You think the vase is connected to the murder?" "Everything, mon ami, is connected," Poirot replied. "The vase, the letter, the laugh, they are clues, but some are designed to mislead. The red herring, it swims in these waters, and we must not take the bait." As evening fell, the household gathered for dinner, the tension thicker than the fog outside. Inspector Grayson's accusations had unsettled everyone, and Lily's tearful protests had cast suspicion on her, though Poirot's defense had tempered the inspector's zeal. Hastings watched as Poirot observed the diners, his eyes lingering on Dr. Thornton's forced laughter, and Mr. Vance's nervous glances at Sir Reginald. "Poirot," Hastings whispered, "do you have a suspect yet?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Suspects, Hastings, are like stars in the day. They are there, but not yet visible. Tonight we watch, and tomorrow we pull the first thread." As the meal ended, Poirot rose, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Mes amis, the truth is near, but beware, the killer, they are among us, and they grow uneasy." Hercule Poirot sees Marsdon Manor dawned with a frail sunlight that did little to dispel the chill that had settled over the estate. The murder of Mrs. Agnes Poole had woven a web of suspicion, and Hercule Poirot, with his unerring instinct for the truth, was determined to find the thread that would unravel it. Captain Hastings, ever loyal but increasingly perplexed, followed Poirot as he moved through the manor with the precision of a metronome, his eyes scanning every surface, his mind piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. In the library, Poirot had arranged his notes into a meticulous grid, each entry a clue or contradiction from the interviews and the reconstruction of the night of the murder. Hastings, peering at the papers, saw the detective's neat handwriting detailing times, alibis, and observations. The footprint in the tower, the laugh at 1 o'clock, the vial of strychnine, the broken vase, the letter Clara had seen Mrs. Poole reading. One detail, however, seemed to hold Poirot's attention, a small, seemingly trivial observation from the kitchen. "Mon ami," Poirot said, tapping a note about the jar of honey, "it is in the smallest details that the truth often hides. The honey, it is used by Mrs. Poole for her tea, yet the teacup in her room was untouched. This is a contradiction, Hastings, and contradictions are the signposts to the truth." Hastings frowned, his mind struggling to keep pace. But if the poison wasn't in the tea, where was it? She didn't eat anything unusual at dinner. Everyone shared the same meal. Poirot's moustache twitched with satisfaction. Precisely, Hastings. The absence of evidence is itself evidence. Come, we must return to the pantry. The kitchen was quiet, the staff subdued after days of police scrutiny and Poirot's relentless questioning. Mrs. Baxter, the cook, watched warily as Poirot examined the pantry shelves, his gloved fingers lingering on the jar of honey. He opened it, sniffed delicately, and then, with a small spoon, extracted a sample, holding it to the light. "This honey," he said. "It has an odor, not unpleasant, but distinct. A trace of bitterness, perhaps." Mrs. Baxter's eyes widened. "Bitter, sir? It's good clover honey, bought fresh from the village. Mrs. Poole used it every night." "Every night," Poirot repeated, his voice soft. "And who else in the household uses this honey?" "Nobody, sir," Mrs. Baxter replied. "The master and mistress prefer sugar, and Miss Winthrop doesn't take tea. Dr. Thornton and Mr. Vance, they're not here long enough to have habits." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Most illuminating. Tell me, Madame Baxter, who prepares Mrs. Poole's tea each evening?" "Lily, usually," the cook said. "She brings the tray to Mrs. Poole's room around 10. It's always the same, tea, a biscuit, and a spoonful of honey." Poirot thanked her and requested to see Lily. The maid, still shocked at Grayson's accusations, entered the kitchen with downcast eyes. "Mademoiselle Lily," Poirot said gently, "you prepared Mrs. Poole's tea on the night she died, oui? Did you notice anything unusual about the honey or the tray?" Lily shook her head, her voice trembling. "No, sir. It was just like always. I scooped the honey from the jar, put it on the tray with the tea and biscuit, and left it outside her door. She didn't like to be disturbed after 10. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "You left it outside her door? You did not enter her room?" "No, sir," Lily said. "She always took the tray in herself. I heard her open the door a few minutes later." Poirot made a note, his pencil moving with deliberate care. "And this tray, where is it now?" Lily hesitated. It was gone in the morning, sir. I looked for it when I found her, but it wasn't there." Hastings felt a jolt of excitement. "Gone? You mean someone took it?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, Hastings. Or perhaps it was never there at all. This tray, it is a missing piece, and we shall find it." Leaving the kitchen, Poirot led Hastings to Mrs. Poole's room, where the police had finished their initial search. The room was as austere as before, but Poirot's attention was drawn to the bedside table, where the untouched teacup still sat. He examined it closely, then turned to the window, which was slightly ajar. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, pointing to a faint smudge on the sill. "A mark, as if something was dragged across it. Not dust, but something sticky, perhaps honey." Hastings frowned. "Honey on the windowsill? But how does that help us?" "It tells us," Poirot said, "that the poison was not in the tea, nor in the biscuit, but in the honey itself, and the tray's absence suggests someone removed it to conceal this fact. We must find that tray, Hastings, for it holds the key to the method." Their next stop was the West Wing, where Poirot insisted on examining the alcove near the tower once more. The faint smear in the dust was still visible, but Poirot's sharp eyes caught something new. A tiny scrap of fabric, no larger than a thumbnail, caught in a splinter on the alcove's wooden paneling. He extracted it with tweezers, holding it to the light. "Silk," he murmured, "and white. The figure in white, perhaps, is not so spectral after all." Hastings' mind raced. "You think someone dressed up to scare Lady Eleanor? But why? And how does it connect to Mrs. Poole?" Poirot's expression was inscrutable. "The figure, the laugh, the poison, they are distractions, Hastings, but also clues. Someone with fingers tracing their edges. "This vase," he said, "was not broken by accident. The force, it was deliberate, precise. And yet Lily was blamed. Why? Hastings ventured a guess. To make her look guilty? To distract from the real crime? Perhaps, Poirot said. Or perhaps the vase held something Mrs. Poole discovered. We must learn more about this letter Mademoiselle Winthrop saw her reading. Poirot summoned Clara Winthrop, who arrived with her usual air of impatience. "Mademoiselle," he said, "you mentioned Mrs. Poole reading a letter in the library. Can you recall any detail? Its size, its seal, anything distinctive?" Clara frowned, her fingers tightening on her sketchbook. It was small, folded, with a red wax seal. I couldn't see the writing, but she looked upset, almost angry. Poirot nodded, his mind clearly racing. "And this was when? 2 days before her death?" "Yes," Clara said. "I didn't think it important at the time." "Everything, mademoiselle, is important," Poirot replied. As the day wore on, Poirot's inquiries grew more pointed. He questioned Dr. Thornton about his knowledge of the manor's layout, noting the doctor's frequent visits to the West Wing for fresh air. Thornton's jovial mask slipped, his answers vague. Mr. Vance, when pressed about his late-night work with Sir Reginald, admitted to leaving the study briefly to fetch a glass of water, placing him near the West Wing at midnight. Lady Eleanor, asked again about the lavender scent, grew flustered, insisting it was faint and possibly imagined. Dinner that evening was a tense affair, the household aware of Poirot's relentless probing. Hastings noted Sir Reginald's protective glances at his wife, Clara's sharp retorts to Thornton's forced humor, and Vance's silence, broken only by the clink of his fork. Poirot, as always, observed, his eyes missing nothing. As they retired to the library, Poirot spread out his notes, his voice low. "Hastings, we are close. The honey, the tray, the silk, the letter, they point to a plan, clever and cruel. Tomorrow we shall set a trap, and the truth will emerge." Hastings felt a thrill of anticipation, tempered by unease. "A trap, Poirot? For whom?" Poirot's smile was serene. "For the one who believes they have outwitted Hercule Poirot. But they have not." Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The 5th day at Marsdon Manor brought a restless energy, as if the house itself were holding its breath, waiting for the truth to break free. Glance at his friend. "We've got a web of stories here, but they're all starting to fray. That letter Clara saw Mrs. Poole reading, it's got to be key, hasn't it? And the honey, the footprint. It's as if someone's playing a game with us." Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet intensity. "A game, mon ami? Oui, but it is a game with high stakes, and the players, they are not as clever as they believe. Today we shall pull at the threads of their lies and see what unravels." Poirot began the day's inquiries with a renewed focus, summoning the household to the drawing-room. Inspector Grayson, still clinging to his theory of Lily's guilt, hovered at the edge of the group, his notebook open but his patience visibly thinning. The household, too, showed signs of strain. Sir Reginald's jaw was set. Lady Eleanor's hands trembled. Miss Clara Winthrop's sharp wit had dulled to irritability. Dr. James Thornton's forced cheer was brittle, and Mr. Harold Vance's nervous tics had grown more pronounced. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding, "the death of Madame Poole was no accident.
nor was it suicide. It was a murder planned with care, and the clues, the honey, the silk, the letter, point to a motive rooted in secrets. Today I ask you to consider, what did Mrs. Poole know that made her dangerous? A murmur rippled through the room, and Hastings noted the quick glances exchanged, Clara's sharp look at Thornton, Vance's fidgeting hands, Eleanor's pale face. Poirot turned first to Sir Reginald, his tone deceptively mild. "Sir Reginald, you said Mrs. Poole brought you papers to sign on the night of her death. Were these papers routine, or did they concern something unusual?" Sir Reginald hesitated, his eyes flicking to Vance. "Routine estate matters," he said, his voice steady but strained. "Leases, accounts, nothing out of the ordinary." Vance nodded quickly. Too quickly, Hastings thought. "Yes, just standard documents. I prepared them myself." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And yet Mademoiselle Winthrop saw Mrs. Poole with a letter sealed with red wax that caused her distress. Could this letter have been among your papers, Monsieur Vance?" Vance's spectacles slipped down his nose, and he pushed them up with a trembling hand. "A letter? I don't recall any such thing. My work is with contracts, not correspondence." Poirot's gaze lingered, then shifted to Clara. "Mademoiselle, you are observant. This letter, can you recall where Mrs. Poole—"
Interesting. And you, Doctor? Thornton, did you ever see Mrs. Poole in the library, perhaps handling papers or letters? Thornton's ruddy face flushed deeper. "I'm not one for poking around the library, Mr. Poirot. I saw her there now and then, but I didn't pay attention to what she was doing." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet you are often in the West Wing, for fresh air, you said. The library is not far from the tower. Did you ever hear the laugh that Lily reported, or see the figure Lady Eleanor described?" Thornton shifted uncomfortably. "I told you I heard nothing. As for the West Wing, I like a stroll at night. Helps me think." The questioning continued, with Poirot circling back to each person, probing for cracks in their stories. Lady Eleanor, asked about her movements after seeing the figure in white, admitted to lingering in the West Wing corridor, hoping to catch another glimpse. "I know it sounds foolish," she said, her voice trembling, "but I felt compelled, as if the figure wanted me to follow Sir Reginald's hand tightened on her shoulder." And Hastings noted the protective gesture, wondering if it masked something deeper. Poirot, meanwhile, turned to Lily, who stood nervously at the edge of the room. "Mademoiselle Lily, you said the tray you left for Mrs. Poole was gone by morning. Did you see anyone near her room after you left it at 10? Lily shook her head, her eyes wide. "No, sir, but I heard the door creak open a few minutes later, like she was taking the tray. I was already back in the servants' hall." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "A creak, you say, and yet the teacup was untouched. This is most curious." After the interviews, Poirot and Hastings returned to the West Wing, where the detective examined the alcove once more. The scrap of white silk, now safely stored in an envelope, was joined by another discovery, a faint scratch on the wooden paneling, as if something metal had grazed it. "Regardez, Hastings," Poirot said, pointing. "This scratch, it is fresh, and it suggests something was hidden here. Perhaps a key, a tool." Hastings frowned. "A key to the tower? But Mrs. Poole had the only one." "Perhaps," Poirot said. "Or perhaps there is another. The tower, it is a place of secrets, and someone wished to keep it locked." Their next stop was the library, where Poirot examined the window where Clara had seen Mrs. Poole with the letter. The sill was clean, but Poirot's sharp eyes caught a faint red smudge, wax perhaps from a seal. "This letter," he murmured. "It is the key to the motive. We must find it." Poirot requested to see Mrs. Poole's papers again, and Jenkins brought a small stack from her desk. Among them was a ledger of household expenses, but tucked inside was a folded note.
Poirot's eyes gleamed as he read it. "Hastings," he said, "this note, it is not the letter Clara described, but it is significant. A meeting at midnight, in the West Wing. Mrs. Poole went to this meeting, and she did not return alive." Hastings felt a chill. "You think she was lured there, poisoned during the meeting?" Poirot nodded. "It is possible. The honey, it was tampered with but not on the tray. The tray's absence is a distraction, meant to make us think the poison was delivered that way. No, the poison was given earlier, perhaps in something she consumed in the West Wing. Dinner that evening was a strained affair, the household visibly rattled by Poirot's probing. Clara's sharp retorts were fewer, Thornton's laughter forced, and Vance's silence more pronounced. Lady Eleanor barely touched her food, her eyes darting to her husband, who seemed preoccupied. Sir Reginald, for his part, spoke of estate matters, but his words lacked conviction. As the meal ended, Poirot rose, his voice cutting through the tension. "Mes amis, the lies in this house are like shadows. They shift, they hide, but they cannot escape the light. Tomorrow, I shall ask more questions, and the truth will begin to emerge." Hastings, watching the faces around the table, felt a growing certainty that Poirot was closing in. The note, the wax, the silk, they were pieces of a puzzle, and Poirot's little grey cells were assembling them with terrifying precision. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The 6th day at Marsdon Manor dawned with a brittle clarity, the sky a pale blue that belied the storm of emotions brewing within the estate's ancient walls. The murder of Mrs. Agnes Poole had frayed the nerves of the household, and Hercule Poirot's relentless probing had begun to crack the carefully constructed facades of its inhabitants. Captain Hastings, ever the barometer of the manor's mood, felt the tension like a taut wire, ready to snap. The discovery of the note in Mrs. Poole's ledger, "Meet me at midnight, West Wing, we must speak of the will," had cast a new shadow, one that pointed to secrets deeper than anyone had yet admitted. In the library, Poirot sat at his makeshift desk, his notes arranged with surgical precision. The timeline of the murder night was now a dense web of times, movements, and contradictions, with the note at its center. Hastings, hovering nearby, couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of a breakthrough, though the puzzle remained maddeningly opaque. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low. "That note. It's a bombshell. A meeting about a will. That's motive, isn't it? Someone stood to gain the truth. It will break free." Poirot began the morning's inquiries in the drawing room, where the household gathered under the watchful eye of Inspector Grayson, whose patience was wearing thin. The inspector's insistence on Lily's guilt had softened, but his skepticism of Poirot's methods remained evident. The household, too, was visibly strained. Sir Reginald's jaw was tight, Lady Eleanor's eyes were red-rimmed. Miss Clara Winthrop's sharp wit had turned sullen. Dr. James Thornton's joviality was a hollow mask, and Mr. Harold Vance's nervous tics had become almost constant. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "The note found in Madame Poole's ledger speaks of the meeting at midnight in the West Wing, concerning a will." This is no coincidence. Someone in this house had reason to silence her. I ask you now, who among you knows of this will?" A heavy silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Sir Reginald cleared his throat, his voice strained. "Mr. Poirot, the estate's will is a private matter. My father's will, which left Marsdon Manor to me, is well known. There's nothing unusual about it." Poirot's gaze fixed on the baronet. "And yet, Sir Reginald, the note suggests otherwise." A secret meeting, a hurried signature. Someone was concerned. Was it you? Sir Reginald's face flushed. "I had no reason to harm Mrs. Poole. She was loyal, indispensable." Lady Eleanor's hand gripped her husband's arm, her voice trembling. "Reginald wouldn't do such a thing, Mr. Poirot. He loved this house, and Mrs. Poole was part of it." Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "Madame, loyalty can mask fear. Tell me, did you ever hear Mrs. Poole speak of a will, or of any secret concerning the estate?" Lady Eleanor hesitated, her eyes darting to Clara. She mentioned something once, a few weeks ago. She said there were old promises that needed keeping. I didn't understand, and she wouldn't say more." Clara's sharp laugh cut through the tension. "Old promises? Eleanor, you're making it sound like a melodrama. Mrs. Poole was probably talking about a raise for the servants." Poirot's gaze shifted to Clara. His voice deceptively mild. "Mademoiselle Winthrop, you are quick to dismiss. Yet you saw Mrs. Poole with a letter, sealed with red wax, that caused her distress. Was it about these old promises, perhaps?" Clara's confidence faltered, her fingers tightening on her sketch.
"Father died. I'd know if there was anything new." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And yet, the note speaks of a will. Someone is not telling the truth." The room grew tense, and Hastings noted Dr. Thornton's sudden stillness. The doctor, usually quick with a jest, had been unusually quiet. Poirot, sensing the shift, addressed him. "Dr. Thornton, you are a frequent visitor to Marsdon Manor. Did Mrs. Poole ever confide in you about estate matters? Perhaps something she overheard in her duties?" Thornton's ruddy face paled slightly. She mentioned once that she'd seen papers in the library years ago that worried her. Something about the estate's future, but it was vague and I didn't press her." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Years ago, you say? And yet, this note is recent. What changed, Doctor, to bring old worries to light?" Thornton opened his mouth, then closed it, his hands fidgeting. The silence stretched, and then, to everyone's surprise, Lady Eleanor stood, her face crumpling. "Enough!" she cried, her voice breaking. "I can't bear it any more. I know something, Mr. Poirot. I didn't want to say, but Mrs. Poole came to me a week ago. She said she'd found a document hidden in the library that could ruin everything. She wouldn't tell me what, but she was frightened. She said she had to act, to protect the family." Sir Reginald's face went white. "Eleanor, why didn't you tell me?" "I was afraid," she sobbed. "She said it was dangerous, that someone might be hurt. I thought she was exaggerating, but now she's dead." The room erupted in murmurs, and Hastings felt a surge of excitement. This was it, the crack in the facade Poirot had been waiting for. The detective raised a hand, silencing the group. "Madame,
This is most significant. This document, did she say where she found it, or what it contained? Lady Eleanor shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. She only said it was in the library, hidden behind a panel. I begged her to tell Reginald, but she refused. She said she'd handle it herself. Poirot's eyes gleamed with triumph. A panel in the library. Merci, madame. You have given us a vital piece of the puzzle. Leaving the drawing room, Poirot and Hastings hastened to the library, where the detective examined the walls with meticulous care. Behind a row of books, he found a loose panel, barely noticeable unless one knew to look. With a gentle push, it slid open, revealing a small compartment. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed with age, bearing a red wax seal, broken but intact.
The document, his mind racing. This could ruin Sir Reginald, couldn't it? If someone else stands to inherit, we, Poirot said, or it could ruin another. The motive, it is now clear. But the method, the honey, the silk, the laugh, these are the tools of a clever mind. Dinner that evening was a somber affair, Lady Eleanor's revelation hanging over the table like a storm cloud. Clara's sharp tongue was silent, Thornton's jests absent, and Vance's hands shook as he lifted his glass. Sir Reginald, pale and withdrawn, barely spoke, his eyes fixed on his wife. Poirot, as always, observed, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the turmoil around him. As they retired to the library, Poirot spread out the codicil, his voice soft but resolute. Hastings, the truth is near. Tomorrow we shall set the trap, and the killer will reveal themselves. Hastings felt a chill, not from the cold, but from the certainty that Poirot's little gray cells were closing in on the murderer, one meticulous step at a time.
Chapter 9. The Trap. The 7th day at Marsdon Manor brought a stillness that felt like the calm before a storm. The discovery of the hidden codicil to the Marsdon will, found behind a secret panel in the library, had sent ripples of unease through the household. Hercule Poirot, with his unerring knack for uncovering the truth, was now poised to tighten the net around the murderer of Mrs. Agnes Poole. Captain Hastings, ever at his friend's side, sensed the shift in the air, a palpable tension as the detective prepared to spring his trap. In the library, Poirot stood before his meticulously arranged notes, the codicil placed prominently among them. The document, with its red wax seal and cryptic mention of an unknown beneficiary, was the key to the motive. But the method of the murder remained elusive. The honey, the silk, the laugh, the missing tray, all were pieces of a puzzle that Poirot was determined to complete. Hastings, watching his friend's calm demeanor, felt a mix of admiration and impatience. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "that codicil changes everything. Someone in this house stood to lose a fortune, or gain one. But how do we catch them? They've been devilishly clever so far." Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet confidence. "Clever, oui, but not infallible. The murderer, they believe they have outwitted Hercule Poirot, but they have left traces, small but significant. Tonight we shall set a trap, mon ami, and the guilty one will betray themselves." Poirot's plan was simple, yet ingenious, designed to exploit the psychological strain that had been building in the household. He announced to the assembled group in the drawing room that he had uncovered a crucial piece of evidence. A second note, he claimed, found in Mrs. Poole's room, which named the person she was to meet in the West Wing at midnight. The note, Poirot said, was locked in a safe in the library, to be revealed the following morning, when the police arrived with a warrant to search the manor's hidden compartments. "It is a matter of hours," Poirot said, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the room, "before the truth is laid bare. The killer, they know this, and they will act to protect their secret. I advise you all to be vigilant tonight. Hastings, catching Poirot's eye, realized there was no second note. It was a fabrication, a lure to provoke a reaction. The household's responses were telling. Sir Reginald's face paled. Lady Eleanor's hands trembled. Clara Winthrop's eyes narrowed. Dr. Thornton's forced smile faltered, and Mr. Vance's fingers twitched violently. Inspector Grayson, skeptical but intrigued, agreed to post a constable in the library to guard the supposed note. As evening fell, Poirot and Hastings took up positions in the west wing, hidden in the alcove where the silk scrap and scratch frame barely visible in the gloom whispered, "The killer. They will come, Hastings. They cannot resist the bait. The note, it threatens their carefully laid plans. The hours ticked by, the manor silent, save for the occasional creak of settling wood. At 11:30, a faint sound broke the stillness, footsteps, soft but deliberate, approaching the library. Hastings tensed, his hand on his revolver, but Poirot's gloved hand stayed him. "Patience," he murmured. "We observe." A figure emerged from the shadows, moving stealthily towards the library door. It was Dr. Thornton, his ruddy face taut with purpose. He glanced around, then tried the door, which was locked as Poirot had arranged. Thornton hesitated, then produced a small tool, a lockpick, Hastings realized, and began working at the lock. Poirot stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "Bonsoir, Doctor. Thornton. You seek the note, perhaps?" Thornton froze, the lockpick slipping from his fingers. His face contorted in a mix of fear and defiance. "Mr. Poirot, I was just checking the door. I thought I heard something." Poirot's smile was cold. "Heard something, Doctor. Or feared something. The note, it does not exist. But your actions, they speak louder than words." Thornton's shoulders slumped, and for a moment Hastings thought he might confess. But then a second sound, another set of footsteps, hurried and light, came from the west wing. Poirot's head snapped towards the noise, and he gestured for Hastings to follow. They moved swiftly, rounding the corner to find Clara Winthrop, her sketchbook clutched to her chest, her face pale in the lamplight. "Mademoiselle Winthrop," Poirot said, his tone sharp. "You too are abroad tonight." "Why?" Clara's eyes darted to Thornton, then back to Poirot. I couldn't sleep. I heard someone in the corridor and came to investigate." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Investigate or conceal? The West Wing, it draws you both. Why?" Before Clara could answer, a cry echoed from the library, a shout from the constable posted there. Poirot, Hastings, Thornton, and Clara rushed to the scene, where the constable stood over a toppled chair, his face ashen. "Someone was here," he stammered. "I heard a noise, turned, and the chair fell, like it was pushed." Poirot examined the room, his eyes scanning the safe, which remained locked. "No note was taken," he said, "because there was none to take. But the trap, it has served its purpose. The guilty, they are nervous, and their nerves betray them." Back in the drawing room, Poirot confronted Thornton and Clara. The rest of the household summoned. Thornton's voice was hoarse. I was curious. I thought the note might clear things up. I've done nothing wrong. And you, Mademoiselle Winthrop, Poirot continued, you were in the West Wing, near the tower, at the very hour Mrs. Poole was poisoned. What drew you there? Clara's composure cracked, her voice rising. I told you, I heard something. I'm not the killer. I saw someone that night in the West Wing. It wasn't a ghost, it was a person, dressed in white, slipping into the tower. The room gasped, and Lady Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. The figure I saw, she whispered. It was real? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Real, oui, but not a ghost. The figure, the laugh, the poison, they are the tools of a clever mind, one that seeks to hide a secret tied to the codicil. Tonight, you have shown your hands, and Hercule Poirot sees all. Thornton's face crumpled, and he sank into a chair, his head in his hands. I didn't kill her, he muttered. I swear it. I only wanted to know what she knew about the codicil. She told me about it years ago, said it could ruin the family. I thought it was safe, forgotten. Poirot's gaze shifted to Clara, who stood rigid, her eyes blazing. And you, mademoiselle, what did you see in the tower? Clara's voice was barely a whisper. I saw someone, I don't know who. They were carrying something, a tray, I think. I didn't stay to look. The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. The tray, it is found at last. Tomorrow, we shall gather again, and the truth will be revealed. For now, sleep, if you can. Hastings, his heart pounding, followed Poirot back to their rooms. Thornton and Clara, he said. They're cracking, aren't they? But which one is it? Poirot's smile was serene. The trap, Hastings, has caught more than one fish. But the true killer, they are still swimming. Tomorrow, we shall reel them in. The reveal dawned with a brittle tension, the air heavy with anticipation. Hercule Poirot's trap, set the previous night, had stirred the household into a frenzy of suspicion and fear. The revelations from Dr. Thornton and Miss Clara Winthrop that Thornton knew of the codicil and Clara had seen a figure carrying a tray in the west wing had cracked the facade of the manor's inhabitants. Captain Hastings, pacing the library where Poirot sat calmly with his notes, felt the weight of the impending climax, certain that the detective's little gray cells were about to unveil the truth. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice taut. You've got them all on edge. Thornton's practically confessed to knowing about the codicil. Mustache twitched with a faint smile. Patience, mon ami. The trap, it has indeed revealed much, but the true killer, they are cunning. They hide behind the shadows they have created. The figure in white, the laugh, the missing tray. Today we shall gather the household, and Hercule Poirot will lay bare the truth, step by step. The household was summoned to the drawing room at noon, the grand space now a stage for Poirot's denouement. Inspector Grayson stood by the door, his skepticism tempered by curiosity, while the constable who had guarded the library the previous night hovered nearby. Sir Reginald Marsdon sat beside Lady Eleanor, whose pale face and trembling hands betrayed her dread. Miss Clara Winthrop clutched her sketchbook, her eyes sharp but wary. Dr. James Thornton's jovial mask had vanished, replaced by a haggard expression, and Mr. Harold Vance's nervous tics were more pronounced than ever. The servants, including Lily and Jenkins, stood at the back, their faces a mix of fear and fascination. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small stature commanding attention. Mes amis, he began, his voice clear and resonant. A crime has been committed in this house, a murder, planned with care and executed with cunning. Mrs. Agnes Poole, the housekeeper, was poisoned with strychnine, and the clues, the honey, the silk, the laugh, the codicil, have led us to this moment. Today, Hercule Poirot will reveal the killer. A murmur rippled through the room, but Poirot raised a hand, silencing it. Let us begin with the facts. Mrs. Poole died between midnight and 2 o'clock, poisoned by strychnine. The teacup in her room was untouched, yet the tray Lily prepared, with tea, biscuit, and honey, was missing. A vial of strychnine was found in her locked box, but this was a distraction, a red herring to suggest suicide. The true method was the honey, tampered with in the pantry, where anyone could access it. He paused, his eyes scanning the room. But why Mrs. Poole? She was no mere servant. She was a guardian of secrets, and one secret, the codicil to the Marsdon will, threatened someone in this house. This codicil, hidden behind a panel in the library, named a new beneficiary to a significant portion of the estate. Mrs. Poole discovered it, and she was silenced. Sir Reginald's face paled. "Mr. Poirot, surely you don't think I—" Poirot cut him off with a gesture. "Patience, Sir Reginald. Let us examine the night of the murder. At 10, Lily left the tray outside Mrs. Poole's room. At midnight, Jenkins heard footsteps near the west wing. At 1, Lily heard a woman's laugh near the tower, and between these hours, Mrs. Poole died. But how was the poison delivered?"
The laugh. They were theatrics, designed to create fear. But the footprint in the tower, the scratch in the alcove, these were real, left by someone who used the tower as a hiding place. Clara's voice was sharp. "You're saying someone staged all this? But why?" Poirot's gaze fixed on her. "To conceal the true crime, mademoiselle. The codicil threatened to disrupt the estate's inheritance. Mrs. Poole, loyal to the Marsden family, planned to reveal it. She was lured to the West Wing with a note. 'Meet me at midnight, West Wing. We must speak of the will.' There, she was given poisoned honey, perhaps in a drink offered during the meeting. Hastings felt a jolt of realization. The tray wasn't used at all, was it? It was taken to make us think the poison came from Lily's tea." "Exactement," Poirot said. "The tray was removed to confuse us, but the poison was in the honey, consumed in the West Wing. And who had motive, means, and opportunity?" He turned to Dr. Thornton, whose face had gone ashen. "Doctor, you knew of the codicil years ago. As you admitted, you were often in the West Wing, claiming to seek fresh air. Last night you attempted to break into the library, fearing a note that did not exist. Why?" Thornton's voice was hoarse. "I told you, I was curious. I didn't kill her!" Poirot's eyes shifted to Mr. Vance, whose hands trembled violently. "Monsieur Vance, you handled the estate's legal affairs. You claimed no knowledge of the codicil, yet your room is near the West Wing, and you left Sir Reginald's study briefly at midnight. Did you meet Mrs. Poole?" Vance shook his head frantically. "No, I swear I only fetched water." Poirot's gaze softened as he turned to Lady Eleanor. "Madame, you saw the figure in white, and you spoke of Mrs. Poole's fear of a document. Your distress, it was genuine. But was it fear or guilt?" Lady Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Mr. Poirot, I loved Mrs. Poole. I would never—" But Poirot's attention had shifted to Clara, whose composure was cracking. "Mademoiselle Winthrop, you saw Mrs. Poole with a letter, and you were in the West Wing the night of the murder, claiming to have seen a figure with a tray. But it was you, was it not, who wore the white silk, who laughed to frighten Lily, who poisoned the honey?" Clara's face contorted, her voice rising. "That's absurd! I'm no killer!" Poirot's voice was relentless. "You knew of the codicil, mademoiselle. You are Lady Eleanor's cousin, with no inheritance of your own. The codicil named you as a beneficiary, did it not? Mrs. Poole discovered it, and you feared she would reveal it, jeoparding hopes that would ruin your secret plan. You lose silk scrap. This silk, found in the alcove, matches your shawl, mademoiselle. The scratch, made by your hairpin as you hid, the laugh heard by Lily, was yours, practiced to unsettle. And the codicil, its beneficiary, is you, Clara Winthrop, named by Sir Reginald's father to inherit half the estate." The room gasped, and Clara's face crumpled.
"I didn't mean to kill her," she cried, her voice breaking. "I only wanted her to stay quiet. She was going to tell Reginald, to ruin everything. I put the strychnine in the honey just a little to make her ill. But she took too much." Sir Reginald stared at Clara, horrified. "Clara, you did this?" Poirot's voice was calm but firm. "She did, Sir Reginald. The figure in white, the laugh, they were her creation to mask her crime. The tray was hidden in the tower, where she thought it safe. But Hercule Poirot sees all." Inspector Grayson stepped forward, his face grim. "Miss Winthrop, you're under arrest." As Clara was led away, sobbing, the room fell silent. Poirot turned to Hastings, his eyes weary but satisfied. "The truth, mon ami, is never pleasant, but it is necessary. The little grey cells, they have done their work." Chapter 11. The Reflection. The aftermath of Clara Winthrop's confession hung over Marsdon Manor like a heavy fog, its tendrils curling through the grand rooms and shadowed corridors. The revelation that Clara, Lady Eleanor's sharp-witted cousin, had poisoned Mrs. Agnes Poole to protect a hidden codicil had left the household reeling. The morning of the 9th day dawned quiet, the pale sunlight filtering through the library windows where Hercule Poirot sat, his notes now neatly folded, his work complete. Captain Hastings, standing by the fireplace, felt a strange mix of relief and melancholy, the resolution of the case leaving a bitter-sweet taste. "Poirot," Hastings said, breaking the silence, "you've done it again." Clara's confession, it was like watching a house of cards collapse. But I can't help feeling sorry for her. She seemed so desperate. Poirot, adjusting his tie with precise fingers, looked up, his eyes thoughtful. "Desperation, mon ami, is the mother of many crimes. Mademoiselle Winthrop, she saw in the codicil a chance for wealth, for security, but also a threat to her carefully guarded secret. She acted not out of malice, but out of fear. And yet fear does not excuse murder." Hastings nodded, his mind replaying the dramatic scene in the drawing room. Clara's collapse, her tearful admission that she had only meant to sicken Mrs. Poole, not kill her, had been a shock to all. Sir Reginald's horror, Lady Eleanor's quiet sobs, Dr. Thornton's stunned silence, and Mr. Vance's nerve
Library, now a place of resolution rather than investigation, felt oddly peaceful. Poirot had requested a final meeting with the household, not to accuse, but to explain, to restore order to the chaos he had unraveled. As they gathered, Sir Reginald, Lady Eleanor, Dr. Thornton and Mr. Vance, with the servants hovering at the edges, Poirot stood, his small frame commanding the room with quiet authority. "Mes amis," he began, his voice steady, "the tragedy of Marsdon Manor is concluded, but it leaves behind lessons that must not be forgotten. The death of Madame Poole was a crime born of greed and fear, orchestrated by one who believed they could outwit justice. But justice, it is like the truth. It cannot be hidden forever." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "Let us review the path to the truth. The clues, the honey, the silk, the laugh, the codicil, were not random. They were pieces of a puzzle, designed to mislead yet revealing in their contradictions. The honey, tampered with strychnine, was the method of murder, delivered not through the tray, as we were meant to believe, but in a drink offered in the West Wing. The tray's absence was a distraction, hidden in the tower to confuse." He paused, his eyes resting on Lady Eleanor, whose face was pale but composed. The figure in white, seen by Madame, was no ghost, but Mademoiselle Winthrop, dressed to frighten, to create an atmosphere of fear that would mask her crime. The laugh, heard by Lily, was her creation, a theatrical touch to unsettle the household. The silk scrap, the scratch in the alcove,
These were her mistakes, left in her haste. Sir Reginald cleared his throat, his voice heavy. Mr. Poirot, the codicil. Clara as beneficiary. It's unthinkable. My father never mentioned such a thing. Why would he favour her? Poirot's gaze softened. Your father, Sir Reginald, was a man of secrets, as many are. The codicil, written 10 years ago, named Mademoiselle Winthrop, occupied as a beneficiary. Perhaps out of gratitude or affection for her family, Mrs. Poole, loyal to the estate, discovered it and sought to act. This, Mademoiselle Winthrop feared, would ruin her plans, and so she acted. Lady Eleanor's voice was soft. She was my cousin, Mr. Poirot. How could I not see it? Poirot's tone was gentle. The heart, madam, is blind to those it trusts. Mademoiselle Winthrop was clever, hiding her ambition behind wit and charm. But the little grey cells, they see what the heart does not. Dr. Thornton, his joviality gone, spoke up. I knew of the codicil, Mr. Poirot, Reginald answered, his voice firm. It will be contested. My father's intentions must be honored, but Clara's actions, they complicate matters. Poirot turned to the group. The law will decide, but the truth is restored. That is the work of Hercule Poirot, to bring order to chaos, to shine light on shadows. As the household dispersed, Poirot and Hastings retired to the library, where the detective began packing his notes. Hastings, watching his friend, felt a surge of admiration. You're a marvel, Poirot. The way you pieced it together, the honey, the silk, the note, it was like watching a master painter at work. Poirot's smile was modest. The little grey cells, Hastings, they see the patterns others miss. But the heart, it must feel the weight of truth. Mademoiselle Winthrop, she was not evil, but desperate, and desperation, it leads to tragedy. They left the library, stepping into the hall where the servants bustled quietly, the manor slowly returning to life. As they walked to their car, Poirot paused, gazing at the ancient facade of Marsdon Manor. This house, it will heal, Hastings, but it will never forget. Nor shall we. Hastings nodded, his heart heavy. What now, Poirot? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Now, mon ami? We return to London. There are always more puzzles to solve, and Hercule Poirot is never idle. As they drove away, the manor receded into the distance, its secrets laid bare, its shadows dispelled by the relentless light of Poirot's mind. Chapter 12. The Unseen Motive. The 9th day at Marsdon Manor brought a deceptive calm, as if the house itself were exhaling after the storm of Clara Winthrop's confession. The revelation that Clara had poisoned Mrs. Agnes Poole to protect a secret codicil had shaken the household, but Hercule Poirot, ever vigilant, sensed that the puzzle was not yet complete. There was a lingering unease, a thread left untied, that tugged at his meticulous mind. Captain Hastings, walking beside his friend through the manor's gardens, felt the weight of the case easing. Yet Poirot's thoughtful silence suggested otherwise. Poirot, Hastings ventured, glancing at the detective's impassive face, you've solved the murder. Clara's confessed. The codicil's been found. Surely that's the end of it. Why do you look as if there's more to uncover? Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes scanning the frost-tipped hedges. Mon ami, the confession of Mademoiselle Winthrop, it is a truth, but not the whole truth. The codicil, it explains her motive, but there is a shadow behind the shadow, a motive unseen, perhaps even to her. Hercule Poirot does not rest until every piece of the puzzle is in place. They returned to the library, where Poirot spread out his notes once more. The familiar grid of times, alibis. Poirot's fingers lingered on the note found in Mrs. Poole's ledger. Meet me at midnight, West Wing. We must speak of the will. The signature, illegible, nagged at him. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low. This note, it was the lure that drew Madame Poole to her death. Clara admitted to writing it, but there is something inconsistent. The handwriting, it is hurried, yet precise. And the codicil, why was it hidden for 10 years, only to surface now? Hastings frowned. You think someone else knew about it? But who? Clara acted alone, didn't she? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Alone in the act, perhaps, but not in knowledge. The codicil, it threatens the estate, but also someone's position. We must look to the heart of Marsdon Manor, the family. Poirot requested a private meeting with Sir Reginald and Lady Eleanor, who joined him in the library with visible apprehension. Sir Reginald's face was drawn, his eyes heavy with betrayal, while Lady Eleanor's delicate features were etched with sorrow. Inspector Grayson, informed of Poirot's continued inquiries, stood by the door, his scepticism now tempered by respect. Sir Reginald? Madame, Poirot began, his tone gentle but firm. The confession of Mademoiselle Winthrop has revealed much, but there is more to understand. The codicil, naming her as a beneficiary, was hidden for a decade. Why did it surface now? And who else knew of its existence? Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. Mr. Poirot, I swear I had no knowledge of it. My father never spoke of such a thing. If Clara knew, she kept it from us all. Lady Eleanor nodded, her voice soft. Mrs. Poole mentioned old promises to me, but I thought it was about household matters. I never imagined. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And yet, madame, you were close to Mrs. Poole. Did she ever hint at a family secret? Something tied to the estate's past? Lady Eleanor hesitated, her hands twisting her handkerchief. She once said my father-in-law was a complicated man, that he made choices that weighed on him. But she was loyal. She wouldn't betray his confidence. Poirot made a note, then turned to Sir Reginald. Your father, Sir Reginald, he was close to Mademoiselle Winthrop's family, no? Perhaps there was a promise, a debt, that led to the codicil. Sir Reginald's face darkened. My father was generous, but he never mentioned Clara's family. They were distant cousins, nothing more. If he wrote that codicil, it was a mistake. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A mistake or a secret? Let us consider another possibility. The codicil, it was hidden behind a panel in this very room. Who else had access to the library, to its secrets? The question hung in the air, and Hastings noted Sir Reginald's sudden stillness.
Hidden here? Sir Reginald shook his head. Vance is meticulous. He would have told me. Poirot's gaze shifted to the door, where Jenkins, the butler, entered with a tray of tea. Monsieur Jenkins, Poirot said, you have served this family for many years. Did you ever hear of a hidden document? Perhaps something Madame Poole mentioned. Jenkins, usually composed, faltered. I overheard Mrs. Poole speaking to someone a month ago in the library. She said something about papers that could change everything. I didn't think it my place to ask. Poirot's eyes gleamed. To whom was she speaking? Jenkins hesitated, his eyes darting to Sir Reginald. To Mr. Vance. The room tensed, and Sir Reginald's face hardened. Vance? He knew. Poirot summoned Mr. Vance, who entered the library with his usual nervous demeanour, his spectacles slipping down his nose. Monsieur Vance, Poirot said, you claimed no knowledge of the codicil, yet Jenkins overheard you discussing papers with Mrs. Poole. What were these papers? Vance's hands trembled. I was reviewing old estate records with her. She found a document, but she wouldn't show it to me. She said it was a family matter, that she'd handle it. Poirot's voice was sharp. And you did not press her, a solicitor, unaware of a codicil that could alter the estate? This, I find hard to believe. Vance's face crumpled.
I suspected, all right. I knew Sir Reginald's father had secrets, but I didn't know what they were. When Mrs. Poole found that document, she was worried. She said it could ruin the family. I told her to keep quiet, that it wasn't worth stirring up trouble. Poirot's eyes blazed. And when she refused, you told Mademoiselle Winthrop, did you not? You knew of her connection to the codicil, and you feared what Mrs. Poole might do. Vance's shoulders sagged. I didn't mean for anyone to die. I mentioned it to Clara in passing, thinking she'd want to know. I didn't know she'd kill her. Sir Reginald rose, his voice shaking. You knew, Vance, and you said nothing. Poirot raised a hand. Monsieur Vance is not the killer, but his silence, it set the stage. Mademoiselle Winthrop, learning of the codicil, acted to protect her secret inheritance. But you, Monsieur Vance, you share the burden of guilt. Lady Eleanor's voice broke the silence. Why, Mr. Poirot? Why did Clara have to die for this? Poirot's expression softened. Madame, the codicil was a spark, igniting old resentments and fears. Mademoiselle Winthrop saw a chance for wealth, but also a threat to her place in this family. Monsieur Vance, fearing exposure, fanned the flames, and Madame Poole.
Eyes were red, her grief for her cousin tempered by betrayal. Dr. Thornton, quiet but shaken, avoided Vance's gaze, while the servants whispered among themselves. As Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave the library, Hastings asked, "Is that it, Poirot?" "The whole truth?" Poirot's smile was weary. "The truth, mon ami, is like a mirror. It reflects what we see, but not always what lies beneath. The codicil, the murder, they are resolved. But the heart of Marsdon Manor, it will bear scars." As they stepped into the hall, the manor seemed quieter, its shadows less oppressive. Poirot's work was done, but the echoes of the case would linger, a testament to the unseen motives that drive even the most calculated crimes. Chapter 13. The Echoes of Truth. The 10th day at Marsdon Manor carried a sombre stillness, as if the house itself were mourning the unravelling of its secrets. Clara Winthrop's confession to the murder of Mrs. Agnes Poole, followed by Mr. Harold Vance's admission of his complicity in stirring her fears about the codicil, had left the household in a state of quiet shock. Hercule Poirot, ever the orchestrator of truth, sat in the library, his notes now neatly packed away, his work seemingly complete. Yet, Captain Hastings, standing by the tall windows overlooking the sodden gardens, sensed a lingering restlessness in his friend's demeanour. "Poirot," Hastings said, turning from the view, "you've solved the case. Clara's in custody. Vance's role is clear. The codicil's been found. Yet you're still brooding. Is there something we've missed?" Poirot's eyes, sharp and reflective, met Hastings. "Mon ami, the case is solved, oui, but the echoes of truth, they resonate. The codicil, it was the spark, but the fire, it was fed by deeper currents. There is one question left. Why did Mademoiselle Winthrop believe her secret was safe for so long, only to act now? Hercule Poirot does not like loose ends." Hastings frowned, his mind grappling with the complexity. "You think there's more to the codicil's discovery? Someone else involved, perhaps?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Not involved in the murder, perhaps, but in the shadows, yes. Today we shall tie the final thread, and Marsdon Manor will be at peace." Poirot requested a final gathering in the drawing-room, where the household assembled with weary resignation. Sir Reginald Marsdon, his face etched with the strain of betrayal, sat beside Lady Eleanor, whose delicate features were softened by grief.
Dr. James Thornton, his joviality long gone, stood by the fireplace, his eyes distant. Mr. Acknowledgement of the detective's genius. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice clear and measured, "the tragedy of Marsdon Manor has been laid bare. Mademoiselle Clara Winthrop, driven by fear and ambition, poisoned Madame Poole to protect a codicil that named her a beneficiary. Monsieur Vance, by his silence, fanned the flames of her desperation. But there is one final piece to this puzzle, a question of timing. Why did the codicil surface now, after 10 years of silence?" He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "The codicil was hidden behind a panel in the library, known only to Madame Poole, who discovered it by chance. But someone else knew of its existence, someone who waited, watched, and perhaps nudged events toward this tragedy." The room tensed, and Hastings noted the quick glances exchanged, Sir Reginald's furrowed brow, Lady Eleanor's trembling hands, Thornton's sudden stillness. Poirot's gaze settled on Jenkins, the butler, who stood rigid, his face pale. "Monsieur Jenkins," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "you have served this family for many years, loyal as Madame Poole was. You overheard her speak of papers that could change everything with Monsieur Vance. But did you know more? Did you, perhaps, know of the codicil's hiding place?" Jenkins's eyes widened, his composure faltering. "Mr. Poirot, I was loyal to the family. I knew nothing of a codicil." Poirot's smile was sharp. "Loyal, oui, but loyalty can blind. You were in the library often, were you not? Polishing, arranging, always present. Did you see Madame Poole at the panel, perhaps, or overhear her speak of it to another?" Jenkins hesitated, his hands twisting. I saw her once, a month ago at the panel. She didn't know I was there. She took out a paper, looked at it, then put it back. I didn't think it my place to ask." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "And did you mention this to anyone? To Mademoiselle Winthrop, perhaps, in passing?" Jenkins's face crumpled. I may have said something to Miss Clara. Not about the codicil, just that Mrs. Poole was poking around in the library, looking at old papers. I didn't think it mattered." Lady Eleanor gasped, her voice soft but piercing. "Jenkins, you told Clara? You set this in motion?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "Monsieur Jenkins is not the killer, madame, but his words, they were the spark that lit the fuse. Mademoiselle Winthrop, already aware of the codicil from Monsieur Vance's indiscretion, grew fearful when she learned of Madame Poole's discovery. She acted to protect her secret."
Human heart, it is complex. A word, a glance, a moment of carelessness, these can lead to tragedy. Monsieur Jenkins, your loyalty was not in question, but your silence. It had consequences.
The room fell silent, the weight of Jenkins's revelations settling over the group. Dr. Thornton cleared his throat, his voice subdued. "Mr. Poirot, you've uncovered every layer of this. But what now? The estate? The codicil? How do we move forward?" Poirot turned to Sir Reginald. "The codicil. It is a matter for the courts, but the truth, it is now yours to carry. Marsdon Manor has seen much pain, but it is strong. It will endure." Lady Eleanor's eyes brimmed with tears. "Mrs. Poole deserved better. She was family to us." Poirot nodded. "She was, madame, and her loyalty lives on in the truth we have uncovered. Let it be her legacy." As the household dispersed, Poirot and Hastings returned to the library, where the detective began gathering his belongings. Hastings, watching his friend, felt a surge of admiration. "You saw it all, Poirot. The codicil, Clara, Vance, Jenkins. Every piece, every motive. How do you do it?" Poirot's smile was modest.
The little gray cells, Hastings. They listen to the echoes of truth, the whispers that others ignore. This case, it was not just about murder, but about trust betrayed, secrets hidden. We have restored order, but the heart, it heals slowly. They stepped into the hall, where the manor's ancient walls seemed less oppressive, the shadows lighter. As they prepared to depart, Poirot paused, glancing back at the library. Marsdon Manor. It will remember this, Hastings. But it will also remember Hercule Poirot. Hastings chuckled, his mood lifting. I don't think anyone could forget you, old chap. As they walked to their car, the manor receded behind them, its secrets laid bare, its echoes of truth resonating in the quiet autumn air. Poirot's work was done, but the story of Marsdon Manor, Hastings knew, would linger in their minds for years to come. Chapter 14. The Weight of Silence. The 11th day at Marsdon Manor brought a fragile peace, as if the estate were slowly awakening from a troubled dream. The confession of Clara Winthrop, the exposure of Mr. Harold Vance's indiscretion, and the butler Jenkins's unwitting role in sparking the tragedy had left the household in a state of quiet reckoning. Hercule Poirot, his work of unraveling the murder of Mrs. Agnes Poole nearly complete, sat in the library, his small suitcase packed, his notes carefully stowed. Captain Hastings, standing by the window, gazed out at the frost-kissed lawns, his mind heavy with the case's lingering echoes. Poirot, Hastings said, turning to his friend, you've tied up every loose end. Clara, Vance, Jenkins, the codicil. Yet you're still here, fussing over your notes. Is there something more? Some detail we've overlooked?
Hastings. Mon ami, the puzzle is solved, but the heart of Marsdon Manor, it still bears the weight of silence. There is one final act, to ensure that the truth does not merely reveal, but heals. Today, we shall speak with those who remain, and we shall leave this house stronger than we found it. Poirot requested a private meeting with Sir Reginald and Lady Eleanor, who joined him in the library with a mixture of gratitude and exhaustion. Sir Reginald's face was lined with the strain of betrayal, while Lady Eleanor's delicate features carried a quiet resolve. Inspector Grayson had departed with Clara in custody, leaving the manor to its own devices, and the servants, including Jenkins and Lily, moved about their duties with subdued efficiency. Sir Reginald, Madame, Poirot began, his voice gentle but firm. The tragedy of Madame Poole's death has been laid bare. Mademoiselle Winthrop's crime, Monsieur Vance's silence, Monsieur Jenkins's careless words, they have all been exposed. But there is one question that remains. How will Marsdon Manor move forward? Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. Mr. Poirot, you've given us the truth, and for that we're grateful. But Clara was family, and Vance, well, I trusted him. The codicil, it's a wound that won't heal easily. Lady Eleanor nodded, her voice soft. Mrs. Poole was more than a housekeeper. She was our anchor. Knowing she died to protect us, it's almost too much to bear. Poirot's gaze softened, his hands clasped before him. The heart, it grieves, Madame, but it is strong. Madame Poole's loyalty, it was her gift to this house. You must honor it by rebuilding, not by dwelling in sorrow. He turned to Sir Reginald. The codicil, it is a matter for your lawyers, but it is also a chance to understand your father's wishes. Perhaps he saw in Mademoiselle Winthrop's family a debt to be repaid, a kindness to be honored. You must decide what that means for Marsdon Manor. Sir Reginald's eyes flickered with resolve. I'll contest the codicil, but I'll do it fairly. My father's legacy deserves that much. Poirot nodded, then addressed Lady Eleanor. Madame, you spoke of old promises that Madame Poole mentioned. Did she ever hint at who else might have known of these promises? Perhaps someone from the past? Lady Eleanor hesitated, her fingers twisting her handkerchief.
She mentioned my father-in-law's solicitor, Mr. Vance's predecessor, a man named Mr. Harrow. She said he was secretive, that he handled things my father-in-law didn't want known. But he died years ago. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Monsieur Harrow, you say? Most interesting.
Things for Clara's family. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. A possibility, Hastings, but one we cannot prove. The past, it whispers, but it does not always speak clearly. What matters is that the codicil was found, and Madame Poole's death has brought it to light. Poirot requested to see Jenkins, who entered the library with a bowed head, his usual composure replaced by shame. Monsieur Jenkins, Poirot said, your words to Mademoiselle Winthrop, they were not meant to harm, but they did. Have you anything more to say? Anything that might ease this house's burden? Jenkins' voice was barely audible. I failed Mrs. Poole, sir. I should have spoken to Sir Reginald when I saw her at the panel. I thought it was nothing, just her being nosy. I never imagined. Poirot's tone was firm but kind. Regret. It is a heavy burden, but it can be a teacher. You must serve this family with greater care, Monsieur Jenkins. Silence. It can be as deadly as a weapon. Jenkins nodded, tears in his eyes. I'll make it right, sir, for Mrs. Poole's sake. As Jenkins left, Poirot turned to Hastings. You see, mon ami, the truth is not enough. It must be followed by understanding, by forgiveness. This house, it has been wounded, but it will heal. The afternoon passed quietly with Poirot and Hastings preparing to depart. The household gathered in the hall to bid them farewell, their faces a mix of gratitude and sorrow. Dr. Thornton, his usual bluster subdued, shook Poirot's hand. You've done us a service, Mr. Poirot. I only wish I'd spoken up sooner about that codicil. Poirot inclined his head. The past, it cannot be changed, Doctor, but the future, it is yours to shape. Lady Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Thank you, Mr. Poirot. For Mrs. Poole, for us all. Poirot bowed slightly. It is my duty, madame, to bring light to the shadows. Marsdon Manor will endure. As they walked to their car, the manor's ancient facade loomed behind them, its stones seeming less oppressive in the fading light. Hastings glanced at Poirot, who was humming softly, his eyes bright with satisfaction. You've done it again, Poirot, Hastings said, a smile tugging at his lips. You've not only solved the murder, but given them a way forward. How do you manage it? Poirot's smile was serene. The little grey cells, Hastings. They see not only the crime, but the human heart. The weight of silence, it can crush, but the truth, it can lift. We leave Marsdon Manor stronger than we found it. As they drove away, the manor receded into the distance, its secrets no longer a burden but a lesson, etched into the hearts of those who remained. The departure, the 12th
Of Clara Winthrop, the exposure of Mr. Harold Vance's complicity, and the butler Jenkins's unintended role in the tragedy had brought clarity to the murder of Mrs. Agnes Poole. Yet as Captain Hastings packed their bags in the guest room, he sensed a quiet melancholy in the air, a lingering echo of the pain that had unfolded within these walls. Poirot, Hastings said, folding a shirt with less care than his friend would approve. You've worked a miracle here. Clara's in custody, the codicil's been found, and the household knows the truth. But I can't help feeling there's a sadness to it all. This place, it's changed forever, hasn't it? Poirot, adjusting his hat in the mirror with meticulous precision, turned to Hastings, his eyes thoughtful. Mon ami, change is the inevitable fruit of truth. Marsdon Manor has been scarred, but scars can strengthen. The truth, it is a light that burns, but also heals. Today we depart, but we leave behind a house that can rebuild. The morning was crisp, the sky a clear blue that contrasted sharply with the heavy clouds of the past week. Poirot had requested one final meeting with the household, not to uncover more secrets, but to offer closure. In the grand hall, where portraits of stern-faced Marsdens watched over them, the remaining residents gathered, Sir Reginald and Lady Eleanor, their faces weary but resolute. Dr. James Thornton, his usual bluster replaced by quiet reflection. And the servants, including Jenkins and Lily, who stood with newfound humility. Mr. Vance had left the previous evening, his role in the tragedy rendering his presence untenable. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice resonant in the cavernous hall. "The shadow that hung over Marsdon Manor has been dispelled. The murder of Madame Poole was a crime of fear and ambition, but it was also a lesson in the power of truth. You have faced betrayal, loss, and secrets, but you stand together now, stronger for it." Sir Reginald stepped forward, his voice steady despite the strain in his eyes. "Mr. Poirot, we owe you a debt we can never repay. You've given us clarity, even if it came at a cost. The codicil will be dealt with in the courts, but will honour my father's memory, and Mrs. Poole's." Lady Eleanor, her auburn hair catching the morning light, added softly, "Mrs. Poole was our heart. We'll never forget her, or what you've done for us." Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching with a faint smile. "Madame, the heart of Marsdon Manor is not one person, but all of you. Madame Poole's loyalty lives on in your resolve to move forward. Let it guide you." Dr. Thornton, his face etched with guilt, spoke up. "I should have spoken about," cleared his throat, his voice trembling. "Mr. Poirot, I'll never forgive myself for what I said to Miss Clara. I'll serve this house better, for Mrs. Poole's sake." Poirot nodded. "Your loyalty, Monsieur Jenkins, was never in doubt. Let your actions now be your redemption." Lilac, the young maid, stepped forward, her eyes bright with tears. "Thank you, sir. You believed me when no one else did. I'll always remember that." Poirot's smile was warm. "Mademoiselle Lily, your honesty was a light in the darkness. Hold fast to it." As the household expressed their gratitude, Hastings felt a swell of pride for his friend. Poirot's ability to unravel not just the crime, but the human heart, was nothing short of extraordinary. The detective's final act was to hand Sir Reginald a small envelope containing a copy of his notes, a record of the case for the family's records. "This," Poirot said, "is the story of Marsdon Manor's shadow. Keep it, not as a wound, but as a reminder of the strength you have found." With farewells exchanged, Poirot and Hastings stepped outside, where their car waited on the gravel drive. The manor loomed behind them, its ivy-clad walls glowing in the sunlight. No longer a place of secrets, but of hard-won truth. As they settled into the car, Hastings glanced at Poirot, who was gazing at the estate with a serene expression. "You've left your mark here, Poirot," Hastings said, starting the engine. "They'll talk about this for years. The day Hercule Poirot came to Marsdon Manor." Poirot chuckled softly, adjusting his gloves. "The mark, mon ami, is not mine, but that of the truth. The little grey cells, they do their work, and then they rest. But there are always more puzzles, more shadows to chase." As they drove down the winding lane, the manor receded into the distance, its silhouette framed against the clear sky.
Hastings felt a pang of nostalgia, not for the tragedy, but for the clarity Poirot had brought to it. "What's next, old chap?" he asked, a grin tugging at his lips. Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Next, Hastings, we return to London, to tea, to order, and perhaps to another mystery. The world, it is full of shadows, and Hercule Poirot is never far from the light." The car rolled on, leaving Marsdon Manor behind, its secrets resolved, its future uncertain, but hopeful. The case of the spectral scheme had ended, but the legacy